Everybody. So I hate to break it to you, especially those of you who grew up in Sunday school, but Noah didn't build a boat. I'm really sorry. I would disappoint you, let you down, slow. If you were here last week, you know what I'm talking about, because Noah didn't build a boat, he built a box. So if you're really thinking about what it would have looked like, it was probably more like this. There's no rudder mentioned, no steering, no navigation. There's no mention of sails, no oars or anything, just dimensions that make it look like a big box. And to make it even more complicated, the language that is used, language like it has, a roof and windows and a door. It makes it sound a lot more like a building, which if you were here last week, you know why that is. Because Noah was actually building a floating temple. This is a bit of a surprise to us because we're used to seeing the pictures that we put on, the walls of our nurseries for our babies. It's super depressing, but we still do it. And what we were talking about last week was that this is actually important for us, right? We get to the Bible, we read all of these detailed instructions on how to build this thing, and we go, that's kind of a little bit boring for us. But then we realize, wait, there's a reason that these details are there. It's trying to communicate something to us using the confines of language. And in the context of the greater story of the Bible, we started last week to unpack a little bit about what it was. And so by way of review, I know it was Memorial Day weekend, and so by way of review, what we saw is that the very beginning of the story, the Garden of Eden, that's what I'm using the tree to represent here, the Garden of Eden was actually not simply a garden, but it was an arboreal temple. It's language that actually sounds and and images that are used later in the Bible to describe temples. Then we go into Noah's Ark and we realize that this was actually described more like a floating building, and there are reasons for us to recognize themes of the original creation being restated here in the story of Noah. Adam and Eve, Eden was created out of the abyss, out of the chaos. And it was out of that watery abyss that life began. And of course, the same story is reenacted, you could say, with Noah. Because now the whole of the world has been uncreated, and Noah is about to help recreate it by what was saved in the ark, animals and people. Then, the same word used for ark, which is actually an Egyptian loan word, TEBAH, shows up only one other place in the Bible. So Noah's TEBAH also was the TEBAH that Moses was in when he was a baby, and his mother put him in a TEBAH, a little box, and that box is what saved him both from the Nile, but really the judgment of the Nile, which came because Pharaoh had commanded all of the boys of the Israelites to be thrown into the river. So this saved Moses, and when Moses' mother sent him out in that box on the Nile, when he was found by the Egyptian princess, she would have assumed that this TEBAH was one of the normal sacred boxes that Egyptians used in order to keep their household idols in for transport. Which means when she opened it, she likely expected to find some idol. Which, of course, an idol is an image, and we were already told that humanity is now the image of God, Imago Dei. And so this Imago Dei, she actually did see an image, an idol, you could say, of God himself. But she found the real one, as if Moses, when he looked upon the face of God, it was like looking upon the face of God. This happens because we actually have the image of God in us. And so now we start to see a pattern unfold for us in the Garden of Eden. We have Adam and Eve, the image of God, put into the garden. God doesn't want any other images made of him because he's already done that work. You don't need to make an idol of God, a statue of God, because we're it. We're actually the image of God. If the world wants to see the image of God, they look to each other. humanity looks to ourselves to say, this is the kind of thing that this is what God is like. All together, collectively, we start to represent more and more fully the image of God. Then, of course, Noah with his work and the recreation, and then we have Moses who is saved from that watery death in order to do this, to bring us to the tabernacle. And all of these rectangles start to make sense to us because this is temple storyline starting at the very beginning of the Bible, actually even before the Bible. Because in the creation, the cosmos, the Bible talks about there being a threefold cosmos. You have the world, the earth, above it you have the sky, and below it you have the watery abyss. It's a threefold cosmos. In Eden, you have the Garden of Eden, which is located in Eden, which is located in the greater world. A three-tier picture of Eden. Then, of course, you get into the tabernacle and you have the same thing. God created it with an outer court, with a holy place, and behind the holy place was the perfect cube of the Holy of Holies, the most sacred space, separated from the holy space with a curtain. That is where the presence of God was. So you start to see this storyline repeat itself and be re-emphasized over and over and over again. But why? Because the whole of humanity is actually meant, the original design was for us to take this temple garden and extend it over the whole planet. The whole of the world, we were supposed to beat back the chaos and the destruction, and we were supposed to form the whole of the planet into a temple for God, a place where humanity would represent him over the whole of the planet. Then when we sinned, we rebelled against God, we were kicked out of the garden, kept safe from now the tree of life, which would make us forever live in this fallen state. And a barrier was put up between the most holy space and the rest of the world. That's the similar barrier that existed here in the tabernacle. This theme repeated over and over and over again. We get to the New Testament, and we're told that Jesus himself was the sacrificial lamb that would have been instituted by Moses because of the Passover and the work in the tabernacle, and that because he was now sacrificed and his blood was sprinkled in the holy place, the most holy place, on the Ark of the Covenant, that's how the nation of Israel was able to secure the forgiveness of their sins. Now the picture starts to get richer and more full. Jesus comes on the scene, and we're told that he was that sacrificial lamb, and it was his blood that would secure for us the forgiveness of our sins. And then later, we're told that one day, out of heaven itself, the holy city, Jerusalem, shaped like the Holy of Holies, will descend down from heaven to earth. So the whole earth will one day become this glorious temple, where the whole of humanity can now, because of the sacrifice of Jesus, be able to enter into the intimacy and the presence of God that we were originally designed for. And so it's a full circle to bring us back to where the Bible story had started. For us, this is important because it actually means that a whole lot of people doing a whole lot of things in all sorts of different contexts are all doing one thing. We are temple makers so that we and other people can enter into intimacy with God. Everything else that is involved in that, all of the work, all of the struggle, all of the heartbreak, all of the teaching, all of the truth, all of the recognizing the role of Jesus in all of it is our work. And no matter where we go or how we do it, whether we're in a garden or we're building a giant box, floating temple box, or we're looking after a single child, a mother who who decides to take great personal risk with her daughter, or we're packing up a portable temple, we're putting all of these, these bases and the posts and the fabric and the curtains and all of this stuff and all of the different furniture that was here, if we're carrying all that, if we're moving all that, if we're designing all that, if we're doing all of that work, it doesn't actually matter what it is we're doing, but we have to create, build, move, all of these things so that we can continue to move ourselves and the rest of humanity closer to the promised land, into the presence of God himself. If you're wondering what it is that you are supposed to be doing in this world, the Bible starts there, it ends there, and it's woven through nearly every narrative of the scriptures. This is who we are, priests in his kingdom, the holy building, the temple of God. That is our purpose. And if we're in this series and we're talking about, are we really sure what it is that you're supposed to be doing? Are you really confident? Am I on the right path? Am I heading in the right direction? If this isn't a part of your story, then the answer is no. I'm not saying that like, oh, there's a couple of choices you have in your life. I'm saying the answer is no, because this is what humanity was designed for. You haven't yet stepped into the fullness of what you were created for. It's the wrong tool for the wrong job. You were actually made to do this. And it is a high and it is a glorious call. It's a gift and it is a privilege for us. Now, where we ended last week, consider this part 2 of last week's message. So I just gave you a super quick overview. Some of you were like, well, if you could have done it that fast, why did it take you so long last week? And so, but anyway, got a lot more to cover. So here we go. So we ended in 1 Corinthians 3 where we were told that we are in fact this temple. So Paul makes it explicit that we are this temple. But for us to really understand that, we got to go back a few verses to get some of the context. So he says, after all, this is 1 Corinthians 3, who is Apollos and who is Paul? We're only God's servants through whom you believed the good news. Each of us did the work the Lord gave us. And what's important here to know is that the Corinthians were a very fractious church. And so a lot of problems, a lot of divisions, all sorts of issues. And some of you are like, really? Problems with churches? That's so surprising. And so they started very, very early. 1 Corinthians 3, we're like in AD 50 or something like that right now. And so some in the church were saying, oh, Apollos is the guy I follow. And others were saying, oh, I follow Paul. So they're dividing themselves based on who brought them the good news. And Paul's like, who cares? Why are you making a big deal about all of these kinds of things? It doesn't matter who Apollos is. It doesn't matter who Paul is. What matters is that both Apollos and Paul did the work that God gave them to do. Each of us did the work the Lord gave us, which is also his implication for all of us. Every one of us has a work to do in the building of God's temple, in the structure that will allow people to come to know God. I'm not talking just mere physics, the physicality of a space, but that was included in the tabernacle. I'm talking about the living as the kinds of people where others can find hope in God. Now, the next passage, he says, I planted the seed in your hearts and Apollos watered it, but it was God who made it grow. It's not important who does the planting or who does the watering. And so we're making up a big deal. Who's that? This one's more important. This one's less important. This one's more. And he's like, guys, you're missing the whole of the point here. You're majoring on the minors. You want to talk about these things, but this isn't actually what matters. What matters, what's important, is that God makes the seed grow. God does it. You're like, oh, it's Apollos. Oh, it's Paul. Oh, it's Peter. Who cares? God does the work. And what I really love, I so love this picture because he talks about it being a seed, right? Just a seed. Every year I plant, or most every year I plant seeds. In the winter, I make seeds so that in my mechanical room, I have a little grow station. If you ever see it, there's lights coming out from around the doors and stuff. It's a grow lights. It's for annuals. Just to clear up any confusion some of you may have had. My little grow area is for annual plants. That's it. And so in that room, I have all of these annuals so that I can save money because I'm a cheapskate later on, and I make sure that the lawn, the yard can look good for all these plants and stuff. But I start with like $1.50 worth of seeds, or maybe $5 worth of seeds. And that's it. You take a tiny little seed, and all of a sudden you stick it in the soil, and a little bleed is so frail, and you got to take a little light, a little love, a little water, a little this, a little that, and then eventually you put it out. And then some of these plants get really pretty and loaded with flowers, and others get taller, and then I have some that get really tall just from a little seed. Why? Because God makes it grow. And so sometimes people will be like, oh, I don't really know what I have to offer at the church. I don't know what I have to help people in my neighborhood. This or that, the other thing. I got all these things, restriction, blah, blah, blah. And, it's like, somehow it feels like if it's something small that we're offering, God doesn't honor it. But he uses the language of seed to describe even the work that he himself did as an apostle of Jesus Christ. It's a small offering. It's whatever it is that God entrusts to us, whatever that is. And when you take that thing that God has entrusted to you, your skills, your abilities, your passions, the sacrifice of your time and your energy, and even if it feels to you like not that much, it's a seed of an offering, God makes it grow. And the focus isn't even so much on what it is that you're able to bring to the table as much as your faithfulness in bringing your seed so that we can watch God do something amazing with it. God makes it grow. And the one who plants and the one who waters work together with the same purpose. With the same purpose. I saw this this week. I was at Alpha. And so sometimes on like Wednesday nights, I don't go to Alpha all the time, but there was Chick-fil-A. And so I went to Alpha, and I don't stay for the rest of it, but I do stay for dinner because Cheryl's out of town, and it was Chick-fil-A. And so like next to like communion, there's Chick-fil-A. It's like nearly sacred food. It's the showbread. So anyway, I'm looking at this, and I'm hanging out with the Alpha people, and it was really, really awesome to be talking with some of them. And one of the guys there, he says to me, yeah, I started coming to the church because I looked at the website, and you had restorative groups. And I thought that was really meaningful. In his experience, churches would often judge people who were struggling in divorce or extended grief or something like that. And he says, here we are trying to meet people in their place of need as a church. And he was like, that really struck me. And it felt like a place I wanted to be a part of. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. But I see all of the other stories behind that, or at least some of the other stories. Somebody put a website up for us so that he could go and find it on the website. Somebody kept it updated with the accurate information. Someone made it appealing enough and navigatable enough so that they could find it. I also know that our whole restorative groups initiatives are still pretty new for us. We haven't been doing them for, the 20 years that the church has been in existence. They're a couple of years old now, 2-3 years maybe. And I know how they started. They started because of Anna Ing. Anna went to go visit another church because we were trying to figure out what her role was going to be here at Beacon, and she had a heart for people in grief. And so our friends at Shelter Rock Church were doing a grief share program. We sent Anna up there to check it out. Anna comes back and she goes, this is something amazing. So someone up there helped us do it as well. Anna gets going. She starts this group. It is so well received. It's meeting so many people in places of deep pain and grief that we say, well, what else is there out there? And so we started adding to it. And then another person steps in and another leader steps up. And then someone says, let me help organize all of these kinds of things for us and bring some more power to. Let's start advertising them in some way. And all of a sudden, I get to see all of these people all over the place doing their part and together, all working with the same purpose. I hear a guy say at Alpha, who, by the way, was there because someone set up Alpha for him. And he says, man, that meant something to me. Gave him a little bit of hope that there is a group of people who are following Jesus and helping others in their moments of pain find hope. This is the picture. This is the dream, right? And then he goes on and he says, and both will be rewarded for their own hard work, for we are both God's workers. And this is interesting because now he's starting to talk about the fact that when you do your work, there is a reward waiting for you. Now things get a little bit tricky here for us, and so it's worth us kind of unpacking this, because a lot of us come from a religious background where we sort of feel like we have to earn our salvation. So I was raised Catholic, and after we left the Catholic Church, I went into Pentecostal churches that were a little more in the kind of the holiness vibe of things, if you know what I'm talking about. You're familiar with those. In both of those circles, Catholic and Protestant circles, I had been, somehow I picked up the vibe, whether it was ever taught directly or something, I picked up the vibe that if I worked really hard, maybe God would love me. If I lived really well, maybe God would love me. And that becomes quite a burden to bear, especially when you realize you're not living up to even your own standards. Forget about living up to God's standards. When you come into the scriptures, though, and you start to read about the life of Christ and the sacrifice in the tabernacle and all of the work of the Passover, what Moses taught us about that and what Paul did with it later on in the New Testament, you start to realize, no. Your salvation isn't based on whether you work hard or not. Your salvation is based on the hard work of Jesus on the cross. And his gift to us, if we are willing to receive it, is salvation because of grace, a gift, because we trust that he will do what he promised to do. So our salvation is secure. That isn't something that we have to work for. But because of our salvation, we naturally begin to do the work that God has for us. Why would we not? Once we begin to see what Jesus is doing in our hearts, why would we withhold that from others? Why would we not create every opportunity if we really do believe what Jesus said is true? Then my goodness, why would we not want to do more and more? And that's what the scriptures tell us about this idea. So then where does our hard work and this reward come in? Well, he tells us, he says, anyone who builds on that foundation, and when you go back in here, you read it, you'll realize he's talking about the foundation that is Jesus Christ. And so the foundation of Christ is his love for us, how he served other people, how he sacrificed even up to his own life on our behalf. So it's all of that kind of stuff. That's the foundation that he's building on, the foundation of Jesus. Anyone who builds on that foundation may use a variety of materials, gold, silver, jewels, wood, hay, or straw. But on the judgment day, fire will reveal what kind of work each builder has done. The fire will show if a person's work has any value. So there is a judgment day coming, and this judgment isn't the one that we often think about, where God judges the world and those who follow Jesus enter into his glory, and those who refuse or reject Jesus don't. That's not what this judgment day is about, because this judgment day actually applies to believers. This is a different judgment day than most of us are used to talking about. And this is where things get a little bit harder for us to hear. Because he's saying, the judgment day comes, fire will reveal the kind of work each builder has done. The fire will show if a person's work has any value. That means that your work could have no value or little value. That means that you could be laboring in this life in the short 60, 70, 80 years that you have been given. 90 if you're super healthy or good genes or whatever, however you get that far. It means you could labor many years, but everything you've built is wood, hay, or stubble, and susceptible to being burned up on the judgment day. This is a frightening reality for many of us to wrestle with. How could it be that I could bury myself in work, I could work myself to the bone, and in the end not have much to show for it? Because you were building the wrong things with the wrong materials, not based on the foundation of Jesus. I can assure you, if you are enslaved to this American idea that you have to work as hard as you can to give everything to your kids so that they can go to a good school, they can live in the right neighborhood, they can drive the right car, so that they can wash, rinse, repeat this whole psychotic cycle over and over and over again to no end. This is wood, hay, and stubble. If that's the whole of your story, that's the story that every other person in America is trying to build out. In fact, most people around the world, that's the story. How could it possibly be that that isn't going to survive the judgment day? It's because we didn't build it on the foundation of Jesus. He goes on to tell us, if the work survives, it is a very real possibility that what we have thrown ourselves into won't survive the fire of judgment. If it survives, though, that builder will receive a reward. But if the work is burned up, the builder will suffer great loss. Now, this is to the point I was saying. The builder will be saved, but like someone barely escaping through a wall of flames. It means you enter into the eternal kingdom with nothing to show for it, smelling a little bit like you just had a house fire. That's the warning he gives us. There is a reward, but there's also the possibility of great loss. For any of you who are interested in return on investments and things like that, this is a wake-up call. This is the kind of a thing that you should say, wait a second, let me just step back. You want to know if you're on the right track? If this isn't in your factoring, then you're living with the most short-term version. You think you're not ready for retirement? Consider this. This is the retirement that never ends. We get into these things and we start to hear this and we go, wow, this is just a different way to be thinking about the whole of the created world and why we're actually here. But then you go, oh wait, this is the story of why we're here. It goes back to the garden and it extends through every major narrative in all of the Bible. You are temple makers, and are you doing it? It's what you were meant to do. And suddenly it all starts to fall into place. He tells us, don't you realize that all of you together are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God lives in you? God will destroy anyone who destroys this temple, for God's temple is holy, and you are that temple. Don't you realize that all of you together are God's temple? While I was at Alpha, I also had a conversation with another woman. She's newer to the church, and she said to me that she had signed up for VBS. And I was like, oh, that's so great. I'm so glad. I hope you have a great time with it. I'm sure you will. And I said, why'd you sign up? And she goes, well, it was because of the story you told last Sunday. If you were here last Sunday, I told the story about Blessy. And some of you remember that story. If not, go check out the message from last week. But she said, I heard that story and I thought, you know what? I want to do that as well. So here we have Blessy's story being an encouragement to another woman to turn around and offer up what she can build on behalf of others. Together, we are the temple of God. You continue to weave these stories together. Share your story. Share your encouragement. Talk to each other about what it is that God is doing in your life and how that might impact what God is doing in another person's life. And all of a sudden, we start to see all of us becoming the kinds of people that God will use to make an eternal investment in our own future stories, but even more importantly, in the stories of many others. As a congregation, right, as a church, we have committed ourselves to a simple mission. And it's actually nothing more than a restatement of the very things that we've been talking about. As a church, we're committed to loving God and loving people, growing in Christ and serving the world. If you think about this through the lens of priestly language, then it starts to gel with the rest of the Bible's storyline. This is what why are we hoping to love God? Because when people together gather up together we can come to worship our God, have our hearts inclined to love him more fully and more deeply. That's temple language. That's the language of the priests. When we talk about loving people, we're talking about gathering up and getting to know each other and each other's stories. Why? Because if you're a Christian and you want to go off on your own, go to your prayer closet and go pray. There's a place for that. You should. That's fantastic. But at the temple, you don't build temples for one person. You build temples for groups of people so that we can do this work together, because together each of us will represent another facet of the glory and the beauty of God and of his sacrifice and his love for us. We grow in Christ. Why do people go to temples? Why do they go to a religious place? So that we get to learn, we get to grow, we get to become more and more like the image of our master. We get to follow in the rabbi's footsteps in this way. The whole of it was meant to serve the world. It started in the garden and it rolled right on through the whole of the New Testament story. We are here so that we can have intimacy with God, but not simply for our own sakes, but so that the world, those who exist in the outer court of the tabernacle, will also be able to experience intimacy with God. That's how we serve the world. With love, with compassion, with passion. Now, particularly at Beacon, I want to encourage you this, because we're in a season where we're continuing to encourage you guys to look at how you might be able to get involved with your spiritual family, and how, we got a lot of stuff coming down the pike. But in particular, the way we want to serve here at Beacon is we want your serving to help you experience spiritual growth. So often, when people come to the church, one of the things we recommend is get plugged into a ministry. And at first, it could seem like, oh, I'm brand new. Like, you really want me to get plugged in? Yes. Not because we simply need you to get plugged in. We're not trying to simply fill slots here. We're not trying to meet a need or do your duty or anything like that. That's not that's not what's driving us. We actually think that you will grow deeper in your faith with Jesus if you continue to serve and to give of yourself. It's a discipline in itself that will break down self-centeredness in our hearts. That's the way he served. We also know that it'll deepen Christian friendships. When you serve, and for all of your teams, by the way, I'm hoping none of your ministry teams that you're currently on are solitary kinds of things. I'm hoping they're all communal and team driven. And if you're a leader, let's throw more energy and passion into that. And if you're a team member, then encourage your team to do more work together, to know each other, to love each other, to serve each other, because that's one of the ways that we get to deepen Christian friendships. You know what friendships are going to last for all of eternity? These will be here, because we'll be in eternity with our Savior and with each other. You're making an eternal investment in that way. And we also want to encourage all of our teams to sharpen their ministry skills, because I think it's a heartache that a local business can be run better than a local church. They're selling widgets and we have the hope of the world. And every detail, every decision we make, every strategy we employ, every time we count something. Sometimes people will say, they're like, we have a lot of numbers. We track a lot of different things at the church. And people will be like, oh, you're so into the numbers. Numbers represent people. People matter. Details matter because details represent souls, and souls matter. And so if we are committed to being the absolute best that we can be as a redemptive community, then let's hold each other accountable toward doing all that we do to the absolute best and even better than our skills currently allow, as we sharpen our ministry skills together and learn to work that. And I want to encourage us to enjoy the journey all along the way, because this really is an absolute delight and a privilege. To be able to work and serve in these ways is an absolute privilege. And so, sometimes people sign up and they're like, I don't want to sign up because, I'm not sure if you're going to make me stay here forever. No. In fact, maybe the first thing you signed up for, you're not good at. Maybe we want you out. And that's important. Like, experimenting matters. And so, like, you might say, I want to try this for a month. I want to try that for a month. I want to try this for a month. And the point of it would be that you're actually trying to find out what resonates in your soul, what vibrates in the way that God has made you and designed you, what brings you joy, so that you can take the joy of your service and bring it into other people's lives as well as you offer up your unique part. That's what matters. You know, and you're not signing up forever. I know some of you have signed up. I told you it was 3 months and you're still doing it 20 years later. That's not always the case. It's only happened sometimes with those who we really found what resonated with them early on. But honestly, it's not about that at all, because there might be a season where you need a respite, or you need to retool and go in another direction and find another ministry initiative, something else. And that's great. That's great, because we want us as a community to enjoy this journey, not feel like it's some sort of oppressive obligation. Shame on us if serving in God's great work feels like an oppressive journey. I want to encourage you guys. Last week we started with this survey. I'm going to ask the band to come out. We're wrapping up here. And what I wanted to do is, this survey that we're asking you to do is not you signing up for anything. Some of you already filled it out. We had 170 people from last week filled out. If you haven't filled it out, take out your phone, put it in the QR code. The 170 people, what you'll see is when you're answering these questions, we're just collecting information about who we are. We got a ton of stuff coming down the pike. We got the building coming that, is going to need a full renovation. We're working with the experts already to, figure out all the different things we're going to do in timelines. And there is so much happening or about to happen that some of you may already have some skills that you want to get deployed in the kingdom and in this way. Awesome. Let us know what those are. At the bottom of this survey, you're going to see that it's going to say, when you're available, and some of you are going to say, jump in right now, and others are going to say, I'm not available right now for 3 months or 6 months or a year, or not available. Maybe ever. Actually, if you're never available, then I don't know that you actually need to fill it out. But we do that because we're saying, listen, if you're saying, plug me in, man, get me going, then we're going to call you in the next week or two. And if you put that in last week and we haven't called you yet, it's because we got a lot of feedback from last week. And so we've been making a bunch of calls. We told you we already got our VBS director. We got an assistant to our VBS director. So VBS is absolutely happening because we had folks here in the church who stepped up and said, let me lead. Let me serve my spiritual family in this way. We got an assistant for one of our key teams, a volunteer team. We got another assistant for our care team. It runs all of our care pastor initiatives and all of that kind of stuff. And so we got some high-level folks that have already stepped up just based on what's been going on over the last couple of weeks. And I know some of you are looking at what your next step might be. So let us know where you're at. Let us know when you might feel like some things might be happening. But all of this is so that we as a community can live out our God-given calling to be his temple, his priests here in this world, that we might represent him well, we might experience intimacy with him, and we might lead many people toward that end as well. So I hope you guys join us in that journey, and I pray that you will continue to pray and support and encourage in every way imaginable so that we reach our full redemptive potential. Let me pray. Lord, I'm asking that you would stir up our hearts, that you would cause us, Lord, even now, those selfish tendencies that have built up in our souls. I've seen it many times where I've just wanted to protect me and mine, and I felt like I had no more to give. And I felt like, Lord, it was time for me to do just for me. And Lord, no doubt there's some wisdom in these things, and yet the whole of the world tells us, Lord, that we ought to grab everything that we can from this world and make it ours. We talk about owning and possessing, not loving and giving. We talk about taking rather than sacrificing. And the culture in this world, often our family of origin, even our friends or family might reinforce this self-centeredness. And Lord, I'm asking that you would break through all of those in my own heart and the hearts of everybody here. Make us the most selfless of your servants. Fill us with the power of the Spirit. Let that light shine in a way that many will come to know and to love you more fully and completely. We thank you for this great privilege. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.